It's clearly on my property, Ben. Don't be ridiculous. Derek Morrison stood in front of his brand-new $35,000 garage, arms crossed, refusing to even look at the survey stakes I'd placed. After 3 months of construction noise and destroyed landscaping, I'd finally had enough. "I think we should get a professional survey," I said calmly. Derek laughed. "Waste your money if you want, but I've lived here 15 years. I know exactly where my property ends." What Derek didn't know was that I'd already ordered the title search and the results would cost him everything. "My name is Ben Calloway. I'm 42 years old and I work as a real estate agent in Westfield, Connecticut. I've been living in my house on Maple Street for 8 years, and until 6 months ago, Derek Morrison had been a decent neighbor. We weren't friends, but we were cordial. He'd wave when he saw me mowing the lawn. I'd bring in his packages when he was out of town. That all changed when Derek decided he needed a 3-car garage with a workshop attached. The problem started in March when Derek mentioned his construction plans over the fence, while I was planting my garden. "Going to build a garage back here," he said, pointing to an area that looked uncomfortably close to our shared property line. "Finally have space for my boat and workshop." "That's great," I replied, though something about the location bothered me. "Did you get the lot surveyed to make sure you have enough setback from the property line?" Derek waved dismissively. "I've been here 15 years, Ben. I know exactly where my property ends. See that old fence post? That's been the boundary since before you moved in." I looked at the weathered post he was pointing to. It was about 20 feet from my back deck, which had always seemed like a reasonable distance between our properties. But something nagged at me about using a random fence post as a legal boundary marker. "Might be worth double-checking with a survey," I suggested, "just to be safe for the building permits." "Already got my permits approved," Derek said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "City inspector came out and everything. All set to start construction next month." That should have been my first warning sign. In my 8 years as a real estate agent, I'd learned that building permits based on eyeball estimates rather than professional surveys often led to expensive problems. Construction began in April. The first week wasn't too bad, just some site preparation and foundation work. But by the second week, Derek's contractor was running heavy equipment at 7 a.m. every morning right outside my bedroom window. My wife Sarah started wearing earplugs to bed. Our 2 kids, Emma and Jake, complained they couldn't concentrate on homework with the constant noise. Even our dog, Murphy, spent most of his time hiding under the kitchen table. "It's temporary," I told Sarah when she asked if I was going to say something to Derek. "Construction projects are disruptive, but they end eventually." By the 3rd week, I realized the garage was bigger than Derek had originally described. Much bigger. What had sounded like a simple 3-car garage was turning into a massive structure with a full workshop, storage loft, and attached shed. More concerning was how close it was getting to our property line. Every day, the structure seemed to creep closer to my back deck and garden area. I walked over to Derek's yard one evening while he was inspecting the day's work. "Derek, I'm a little concerned about how close the garage is to our property line. Are you sure about the measurements?" Derek's expression darkened. "Ben, I told you already, I know exactly where my property ends. That garage is well within my boundaries." "I understand, but from my deck it looks like it might be awfully close. Maybe we should get a survey done just to be absolutely certain." "Listen," Derek said, stepping closer to me. "I don't need some real estate agent telling me about my own property. I've lived here 15 years. You've been here, what, 8? I was measuring this lot before you even knew this neighborhood existed." His tone was hostile now, very different from the neighborly Derek I'd known for years. "I'm not trying to tell you anything," I said calmly. "I'm just suggesting we verify the boundaries before the garage is finished. If there's a problem, it's easier to fix now than later." "There's no problem," Derek snapped. The only problem is you sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. I walked back to my house, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The garage looked too close, and Derek's aggressive reaction to a simple suggestion made me more suspicious, not less. That night, I did what I should have done weeks earlier. I pulled up the property records for both our houses on the county assessor's website. What I found made my stomach drop. According to the official property records, the lot line between our properties was not where Derek thought it was. In fact, if the county maps were accurate, Derek's new garage was being built almost entirely on my property. I spent the next hour cross-referencing the legal descriptions, lot numbers, and boundary measurements. Every source I checked confirmed the same thing. Derek had seriously miscalculated where his property ended. The old fence post he'd been using as his boundary marker was at least 20 feet inside my property line. I called my real estate attorney, Patricia Walsh, first thing the next morning. "Ben, you need a professional land survey immediately," she said after I explained the situation. "Property records can give you a general idea, but only a licensed surveyor can establish the exact boundaries. What if the survey confirms that Derek's garage is on my property? Then Derek has a very expensive problem. Building on someone else's land without permission is trespassing and creates liability issues for both Derek and his contractor. What are my options? Depends on what the survey shows and how Derek responds. Best case scenario, he moves the garage before it's finished. Worst case, you end up in court forcing him to tear down a completed structure." I hired Morrison Land Surveying that afternoon. They could have the survey completed within a week, but they warned me that if there was a boundary dispute, I should stop construction immediately to prevent further encroachment. That evening, I walked over to Derek's house to explain what I'd discovered and ask him to halt construction until we could resolve the boundary question. Derek answered the door holding a beer, clearly annoyed at being interrupted during dinner. "What now, Ben?" "Derek, I looked up our property records last night, and I think there might be a serious problem with the garage location." "Here we go again." I'm not trying to cause problems, but according to the county records, our property line is about 20 feet further into your yard than you think it is. Derek laughed. "County records, Ben. I've been maintaining that boundary for 15 years. I know where my property ends. I've hired a surveyor to establish the exact boundaries. Would you be willing to stop construction until we get the results?" Derek's face turned red. "Absolutely not. I've got contractors scheduled, materials delivered, and a timeline to meet. I'm not stopping my project because you suddenly decided to play property expert. If the survey shows the garage is on my property, you'll have to tear it down anyway. The survey will show exactly what I've been telling you. That garage is on my property and you're wasting everyone's time with this nonsense." The survey team arrived the following Monday morning. I watched from my kitchen window as they set up equipment and began measuring from established reference points throughout the neighborhood. Derek came out of his house when he saw the surveyors, clearly agitated. "You're really going through with this?" he called across the yard to me. "Just getting accurate measurements," I replied. "This is harassment, Ben. I'm documenting this for my attorney." By lunchtime, the surveyors had placed bright orange stakes throughout both our yards, marking the actual property boundaries. Even from my kitchen window, I could see that Derek's garage was not where he thought it should be. The survey results were delivered 2 days later. According to the professional land survey, Derek's garage was built 23 feet onto my property. The structure was almost entirely on my land, with only a small corner actually within Derek's boundaries. I called Derek that evening to discuss the results. "Derek, I have the survey results. We need to talk." "Let me guess. Your fake survey says my garage is on your property." "It's not a fake survey. It's a professional land survey conducted by a licensed surveyor. The garage is 23 feet onto my property." Silence on the line. "Derek, that's impossible. I know where my property line is. The survey shows otherwise. I'm willing to work with you to figure out a solution. But we need to acknowledge the facts. I don't acknowledge anything. That garage is on my property and I'm finishing construction regardless of what some surveyor says. He hung up on me. The next morning, Derek's construction crew was back at work, installing electrical systems and hanging drywall. It was clear Derek intended to finish the garage despite the survey results. I called Patricia Walsh and explained the situation. Ben, you need to take immediate legal action. Every day Derek continues construction, he's further trespassing on your property and creating additional damages. What kind of legal action? File for a temporary restraining order to stop construction and prepare for a boundary dispute lawsuit. Derek is essentially stealing your land and building on it without permission. If watching stubborn neighbors learn that property lines aren't suggestions makes your day, hit subscribe. Because Derek's about to discover that 15 years of assumption doesn't beat legal documentation. Patricia filed for the restraining order that afternoon. Within 24 hours, we had a court date scheduled for the following week. Derek received the legal papers on Friday evening. He came storming over to my house an hour later, waving the documents in his hand. Are you serious with this, Ben? You're taking me to court over a property dispute? I tried to discuss this with you reasonably. You refused to acknowledge the survey results. Those survey results are wrong. Then prove it. Hire your own surveyor. Get a second opinion. Derek stared at me for a long moment. You realize this is going to cost both of us thousands of dollars in legal fees. It doesn't have to. You could acknowledge the survey results and work with me to figure out a solution. The solution is for you to drop this ridiculous lawsuit and let me finish my garage. On my property. It's not your property! Derek stormed off, but I could see uncertainty in his eyes for the first time. His absolute confidence was starting to crack. The court hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Derek hired an attorney, which told me he was taking the situation seriously despite his public bravado. On Tuesday, Derek's attorney called Patricia. Mr. Morrison would like to hire his own surveyor to verify the boundary measurements, the attorney said. That's fine, Patricia replied, but construction must stop until the boundary dispute is resolved. My client is not willing to halt construction based on one survey. Then we'll see you in court tomorrow. Wednesday morning, I sat in the courthouse waiting room with Patricia, reviewing our evidence. We had the professional survey, property records, county maps, and photographs showing Derek's garage clearly extending onto my property. Derek arrived with his attorney looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed too tight. He avoided eye contact with me while we waited for our case to be called. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Patricia presented our evidence methodically, showing the judge exactly how Derek's garage violated the established property boundaries. Derek's attorney argued that Derek had relied on existing fence markers and had maintained the boundary for 15 years without any previous disputes. Your Honor, the judge said after reviewing all the evidence, boundary disputes must be resolved based on legal surveys and property records, not assumptions or informal agreements. The survey clearly shows that Mr. Morrison's garage extends significantly onto Mr. Calloway's property. The judge issued a temporary restraining order stopping all construction until Derek could provide a second survey confirming or disputing the boundary measurements. If the second survey confirms Mr. Calloway's survey results, the judge continued, Mr. Morrison will need to relocate or remove the structure from Mr. Calloway's property. Derek's face was ashen as we left the courthouse. 3 weeks later, Derek's surveyor delivered results that confirmed our original survey. The garage was indeed 23 feet onto my property. Derek's attorney called Patricia the next day. Mr. Morrison is prepared to discuss settlement options. We met at Patricia's office the following week. Derek looked defeated, very different from the confident neighbor who'd laughed at my concerns about property boundaries. Mr. Morrison, Patricia began, our client is willing to consider several options to resolve this dispute. What kind of options? Derek's attorney asked. Mr. Calloway could sell the affected portion of his property to Mr. Morrison at fair market value, allowing the garage to remain, or Mr. Morrison could relocate the garage to his actual property, or the garage could be partially demolished to comply with the boundary lines. Derek finally spoke. How much would it cost to buy the land? Patricia consulted her notes. Based on current property values, approximately $45,000 for the affected area. Derek winced. Combined with the $35,000 he'd already spent on the garage, this mistake was going to cost him $80,000. What about just moving the garage? The contractor estimates it would cost about $60,000 to dismantle and relocate the structure. And partial demolition? Approximately $25,000 to remove the portion that's on Mr. Calloway's property, but that would leave you with a significantly smaller garage. Derek sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he looked at me directly for the first time since the court hearing. Ben, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about the property line, and I was wrong to dismiss your concerns. I appreciate that, Derek. I can't afford to buy the land or relocate the garage. Would you be willing to accept partial demolition plus compensation for the legal costs and inconvenience? I thought about it. Derek was clearly struggling financially with the situation, and I didn't want to bankrupt my neighbor over a mistake. I'd be willing to accept partial demolition, legal costs, and $10,000 compensation for the months of disruption and trespassing. Derek nodded. That's fair. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. Derek paid my legal costs, $8,500, the $10,000 compensation, and the $25,000 demolition costs. His dream garage was reduced to a 2-car structure that barely fit his cars, let alone his boat and workshop equipment. Derek hired a surveyor to mark all his property boundaries with permanent stakes, ensuring this type of mistake wouldn't happen again. 6 months later, Derek and I had settled into a new normal. We weren't friends, but we were respectful neighbors again. Derek had learned to check property boundaries obsessively before making any outdoor improvements. Sometimes I'd see Derek in his reduced garage space trying to fit his boat and tools into a structure half the size he'd originally planned. It was a constant reminder of how expensive assumptions can be when dealing with property lines. Derek's refusal to consider that he might be wrong had turned a simple boundary question into a months-long legal battle. If he'd been willing to verify the boundaries before construction, he could have saved himself $43,500. The bright orange boundary stakes Derek installed became a neighborhood conversation piece. Other residents started asking questions about their own property lines, and several hired surveyors before undertaking improvement projects. 2 years later, when Derek decided to sell his house, the reduced garage size significantly impacted the property value. Derek's 15 years of knowing his property boundaries had cost him not just the immediate settlement expenses, but also the long-term value of his investment.